colleagues would tell you I was possibly a bit like a drill sergeant. But first year we did it, so we literally built like a festival performance stage in Martin Place. We geared it so that our main portion of the competition was crescendoing at lunchtime when there'd be 5,000 people out in Martin Place, and it was pretty wild. And you know, when we talk of all of the people that have spoken today, they talk about kind of, you know, Phil mentioned about hiring for attitude, and you know, Toby's talked about the great people that he's had involved in things like that. Something I suppose I try or I take personally is having some kind of influence on people and their coffee journey, as somebody who's had that mentorship from many great industry people over the years. I feel a need to kind of try and pass that on to other people. So they performed amazingly. We had a great panel of judges. We had a former world head judge there judging with us, and the performance of these people was amazing. So you know, I can be frank in saying that by the end of the event, I was like a proud dad. You know, I was super proud of all these people, and I wasn't even worried about the fact that we managed to pull this thing off and I hadn't stuffed it up. So you know, the following year we went back. I was challenged to make it better. By that time, I'd got a relationship with La Mazzocco. We designed a pour your own latte art stand off to one side. We had thousands of people coming through all day pouring their own latte art, and sort of made it a bit more interactive. And the second year was probably even better than the first year. So, I mean, these are things that doing something like that and almost kind of being in terms of coordinating or event managing is an amazing thing that I never thought I could do from behind a coffee machine. It's crazy where your journeys take you, and it's all. Don't be afraid to be a little bit diverse in what they want to look at their Instagram or their TikTok or whatever. People really appreciate a little bit of interaction, transactionalist experience, I think. And we don't even have to talk about what coffee he wants, and I can just give him a coffee, and you know, perhaps he pays for it, and the transaction takes place, and we've just talked about how his day is and how the weather is and how his work's going and whatever. That ability to give that to people, I've never had that as a consumer, because I spend, you know, if I go to cafes, it's people who I know, but yeah, but I think that's don't how
there's an opportunity. Jeff was with Kerry Ingredients for many years, now with Alchemy Cordial Company. Yep. And many of you have seen the Alchemy products through cafes across Australia. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, as you just heard, you've been in the industry for a few years. Something I stumbled across, really. I suppose I was 17 years old. I'd had 17 jobs. Didn't know what I wanted to do. My sister was working for a coffee company. The guy was building a fence, and I needed a casual for the day to do some labour. And that was my entry into the coffee industry. So I did a day's work. He said, geez, you work pretty hard. How about you come and work in my warehouse? And I did. And I worked in his warehouse. And I started to manage his warehouse after a period of time. And I got bored and I started fixing coffee machines. And I became the service manager for this business. And that carried on for a while. And then I started to go out and do deliveries and have customer-facing interaction. So this is a time you would not know, but it was before espresso. So everything was filter. We imported coffee from Hawaii, Kona Coffee. It was sachet packed, and we brought in 2 packs. One pack was a 2-ounce pack. We used to sell that in Melbourne. The other pack was a 1 3/4 ounce pack, and we used to sell that in Brisbane. And the reason for that was Melbourne was a more ethnic-based community, so they wanted a stronger coffee. The Brisbane area wanted a lighter flavoured coffee, and that stage, you went to a cafe, and it was much like the American kind. You went and got a white coffee or a black coffee. There was a guy in Piccadilly Arcade called George Londy, and George had the Piccadilly Cafe, and he came up with a cappuccino. And he used to have a Harros boiler on the counter, and he'd make a batch of filter coffee, and he'd keep those lines in a filter basket. When they were done, he'd put another pack of coffee on top of those spent grinds and run another jug of water through that. And that was his coffee essence. At lunchtime in Piccadilly Arcade, there would be people 30, 40 deep with George making coffee using his essence, steaming milk on the Harros boiler, and making these cappuccinos with tops on them, but this high. You know, everybody would sit there and eat the cappuccino with the chocolate on it and the milk and the froth. And it was all about eating the froth. It wasn't about drinking the coffee. The coffee tasted shit. And that was the first cappuccinos available in Brisbane. You know, maybe some of the Italian restaurants you could get one because they might have had an espresso machine. And they had two restaurants, one in Queen Street and another one down in New Farm. And they were restaurateurs. And we used to go and deliver coffee to them. And you know, that was the restaurant of the town. Continue to do that, and I ended up becoming the manager of the business and running the business and employing people. And it was something that was very volatile because shipping coffee in by sea, you have peaks and troughs in the offing. And I'd make sure I bought one that was okay, and then I'd go to the restaurants and I'd say, look, I'm sorry, we haven't got any product, but I've got you this. It's the best product they've got. And they'd drink it, and it'd be okay to get them through. They said, oh, but we really want yours, it's so much better. You know, these people had better coffees than us, but there was no way in the world I was going to give it to my customers. But what they thought was I'd gone out of my way to make sure that they could supply their customer. Because what we do when we supply people, we actually supply the consumer. The consumer's the person that gets disgruntled and takes her out on the barista or on the restaurateur if they can't get a cup of coffee. It's our job to make sure that they can provide that service to people. So I continued to do that, and it was quite a good little business going along, but the guy that owned it wasn't very ethical. Used to really dance around the edge of the law. And it was a bit stressful working there. And one day sitting in the office and there was a knock at the door and about 5 police came through the door. And it was the fraud squad, and they took all of our paperwork, we had a computer that had a disk that was about this round, They took that, they took everything, wheeled it all out, phones are ringing, and I'm running down to newsagents getting notepads and pens so people could answer the calls and write down what customers wanted to order. The next day, a photocopying people's customer cards so that we could know what products they were buying and who to deliver it to and who owed us money, who didn't owe us money. And I was sort of doing that. And this was sort of teaching me a little bit about my values in life. I went on holidays. I came back and my wife had just found out she was pregnant with our first child. I was feeling really, really good. And I went to the office and I'd heard the fraud squad had been in again, taken another load of products, of the office material. And I said, I just can't do this. This is not right. I can't work in this environment. So I went home. My wife had, as I say, just fallen pregnant, just found out she couldn't work, and told my wife I'd resigned. So we had a new house, a kid on the way, and 2 people now not working. Fortunately, I saw an ad in the paper for a coffee company called ASCO, Australian Star Coffee Organisation, and it was owned by a corporate. And I thought it was just a Brisbane sales rep. I had the interview there, finished that, came home and I was talking to some friends and they said, how'd you go? And I said, oh, yeah, no problem, I've got that job. I said, I tell you what, I said, in 6 weeks' time, I'll have the job of the guy that interviewed me. And they looked at me and laughed. Next day, I got the call to say I've got the job. And in 5 weeks' time, I had the job of the guy that interviewed me because he knew nothing about coffee. There was a corporate that owned a coffee business that knew about bakery products, but they didn't know anything about the coffee products. So it evolution. This guy stayed working, he didn't lose his job, but they just sort of moved him aside. And it was good because it was an ethical business. It was going on corporate. There's a lot of money behind you. You could do certain things. And along came a coffee company called Mokapan. Mokapan acquired ASCO, and that business was sort of, I suppose, no more. And they didn't need me because they already had their salespeople. And this company said to me, look, we want you to stay and come with us and come down to Sydney and start up a food service business for us in a bakery industry. So I thought, this is great, you know. So it was my first step out of a state role into a national role. And I sort of did it. And, you know, Bird's Foot was a little bit shaky at that time, but it was good, great experience. I had 3 R&D technologists working for me. I was developing products that would go into the food service industry, but it wasn't my passion. It was a job that paid the bills, but it really didn't do anything for me, you know. And I found myself reflecting on one of the days when I was in Brisbane. If I could give him some coffee. He'd heard about this Blue Mountain high-grown coffee, and I got some for him. I did, and I made it in the French press. And today, into the back of my mouth and up to my mouth, have a look around for something else, and for Queensland. It's all dotted all around Australia. They were all used to dealing with the state manager, so every deal that they got was different. There was no standardisation anywhere across their system. And it was about the time when the espresso revolution, as I call it, was starting. So everybody gone out and bought an espresso machine, and I meant everyone, but nobody knew how to use them. That was a real problem. So you could go out and get espresso coffee now, but it was really, really bad. So there was a few companies that were then starting to get together and go, we need to train people how to make coffee, and we need to lock that into our brand. So Young Yellow Arts and all of the international chains that sort of, at that stage, were the only people that had the budget to be able to train people. So you would, you know, if you were wanting to put up one of our windbreaks, for instance, you had to have a barista work in your store who had to have been trained by one of our people. Now, the training was pretty poor by today's standard. In fact, I was a trainer. And I would go into cafes and teach someone how to make coffee, you know, which was a basic, you know, a start-up, the process, making coffee, shutdown process. And I always remember one day going to Swan Hill, and I was going to see my agent there, and we were going to a cafe to show this person about coffee, and we're going to do some coffee training. Turn up, and there's 50 people in this cafe. Everybody that had a coffee machine anywhere near Swan Hill was there because the guy from Doe Edwards was going to show them how to make coffee. I didn't really know anything, you know. I knew how to use a machine, but one thing I was good at was being able to judge people and pick the person that knew. So I started talking to all the people about this and that, you know, what about coffee? What are you doing with coffee? And there was one guy there that seemed to know his stuff. So I said, look, I need to keep talking. So how about I get you to come and do this? And I'll just keep talking you what he was doing. So he could make the coffees. I could make a coffee to save a life, really. But I could talk about how to start a machine. I could talk about the process of making it. And one of the things I was doing was going, okay, well, you know, the importance of cleaning, because nobody knew the importance of cleaning the machine. There are different group heads. So one of our processes would be clean one side of the machine, leave the other side dirty, make coffees people can taste from either side, and they can see the difference. Every day I clean my machine. So I said, well, can you come and show us how you clean your machine? So she comes out, she picks up a rag and she wipes it like this, and she wipes it underneath there. She says, the group handle puts it all back, and it's done. And that was the level of skill, and she was typical of it all over Australia. But nobody knew the importance of cleaning the machines or really how to use them. They didn't know how to cream milk that way. So it was a real So I basically ran 48 businesses because these guys that had the distributorship were just little guys that decided they wanted to sell coffee and they didn't really understand business. So it was educating people on their cash flow, what they needed to do, how they needed to deal with customers, not giving everybody credit because they were your mate, all of those sorts of things. We then worked on how do we grow this business? How do we grow the not just the agent business, but the total business? And it was about standardisation as it really was. So we came up with a training / repair document, and then made sure we could document all of the things. So with that, we got 5% of the 4 and 5 star market in Australia. So we took what was probably turning over about $5 million a year business to what was turning over a bit over $20 million a year back in the day. I was asked by the company if I would consider, for my success, moving to the United Kingdom. I had a business over there that was losing about £300,000 or £400,000 a year. Had 120 employees in it, and they just couldn't get it right. The management team were just not performing. So I remember flying over for my interview. So I was sort of getting a jumbo, fly to London, get on another plane, fly to Amsterdam, land, get picked up by a car, go to the office in Amsterdam, spend 4 hours being interviewed, back to a hotel, sleep that night, picked up by somebody the next morning, flown to London, interview in London, and dropped off in Piccadilly near my hotel to catch the plane home that night. So I had, I think, less time on the ground than I was going to have in the air. And I'm talking to my wife going, I'm not sure if I can do this job. It's a pretty big job. Very, very supportive. She said, you can do it. I'd do it. So, okay, yeah. So, yeah, I accepted and moved my family from Australia to London for 4 years. And set about as one team, part of two, changing how that business operated. So we took it from a £400,000 loss to had some fantastic times with people and my staff, educating my staff, as well as customers in the UK market. Because the UK market, you think the coffee scene in Brisbane was bad then. I started drinking chocolate in the evening because I couldn't drink a coffee. It was really bad. One of the things I remember when I got there after my first management team meeting was they asked me what do I think about the business. I said, I think we're a company that's had 43 salespeople. When I left, there was only 2 salespeople there that were from the original 43. We just changed because they just didn't have the grapevine that they could buy coffee at £2. And I'd not long been in the country, so I said, okay, that's fine. We can't do it at £2. So I went into London, met with Rob, the buying guy, and introduced myself. It's our first meeting, and I said, look, sorry to have to say this to you, but your tender will remove our offer from the table. We can't do it at £3. I hear you can do it for £2. You're probably going to go that way anyway, but I just want you to know we're not in the market. And he went, oh, okay, yeah. You're going to want the same level of service you're getting from me. Yeah. You know the price of coffee. I said, you can see that. I said, ask him how he's going to give you a trade sector manager and all of those salespeople and make a profit. And he looked at me and he said, shit, I'm going to crash and burn, aren't I? I said, not my problem. I'm just saying, ask him the question. I said, we'll make sure we support you through the process because you're a customer. I ended up walking out of that meeting with the business at £5 a kilo. He understood the value of what we were offering. We weren't selling coffee beans, as Phil said. We weren't taking a beans in there. We were actually offering a whole process of auditing. We had technical service people. We had everything that his business needed to survive. I got a phone call from that guy 2 years later, and he'd just been made the head buyer for the BHS group. And he wanted to thank me because he would have lost his job if he'd done what he wanted to do. So education of your customers and your people and understanding what you're doing is very important, and what I've tried to show people. So all good things come to an end, I suppose, when you're on an expat corporate role. And I came with my contract, and I could have either Amsterdam, spoke to an old friend that was in ingredients. And I said, I'll just keep an eye out for any jobs that are coming up. So I came back to Australia, and there was a bit of a story about that. But anyway, I started working for Da Vinci, over 55 million. And we needed to find a way that we could get there to do that. So I've come back into Australia. I've been away from the coffee industry for a while, but a lot of my friends and contacts were still in the industry. And I also felt a little bit beholden to the industry because it had given me a pretty good life to date. I'd worked in the industry. I've been in the UK. I was been driving around in my S-type Jag, living in a 5-bedroom house paid for by the company, flying around Europe, having a really good time. So I thought, how do I give back at the same time do my role? And I've been thinking about it, and I've thought about, what we did in Darwin, Bert's about training, and how we sort of kicked off a lot of different training things. And, Corinne's first Barista Championship, where she got her start to go to the Worlds, was an event that Deli Egberts set up. We paid $120,000 that year just to set up a competition that allowed people to compete to get somebody to go to the Worlds. And so how can we do that? I sort of, the thinking of the people in that business had given me, I suppose, more of a holistic approach to doing business. If the industry grows, we grow. So how best can we do that? So I looked at sponsorship, and I looked at doing sponsorship for barista competitions in Australia and other parts of Asia, because my role was Asia Pacific, was Japan, India, Australia, and everything in between. So started to sponsor latte art competitions, ASCA, all the different competitions around. The first year, Jack Hanna, who opened up the grounds, won the latte art competition, paid for Jack's ticket to go to Europe to compete in the latte art competition, where he became a world latte art champion. Was able to support people like Dave Macon, Carl Sayer from New Zealand, Simo, Craig Simons, a number of different baristas within Australia on their endeavours to become better than they were. And the beauty of it all was that by them training and being better, got other people training and being better. And the payback for the business I was in was we were associated to the cream of the barista society. So we were involved with everything they were doing. We were there. A lot of these guys would never put syrup in their coffee, but by association we were with them. And everybody else aspired to be like these guys. So they all thought they had to have our syrups to do that. So it paid the corporate dividend, but it also paid my dividend. And I was very fortunate to be able to utilise some money in that way to do that, I suppose. We sort of travelled around the world, I suppose, with that, into one point when we were in Atlanta, and Tim Adams was the Australian champion that year, and we'd accompanied Tim to the Atlanta World Barista Championships, and I'd been on stage doing a bit of as a sponsor, if you pay enough money, you get to talk. So I was having a bit of a talk about my views on WBC, and it was something which is very true, is that training makes you better. And if you train and get better, your competitors have to train and get better. And their competitors have to train and get better. So the consumer starts to drink something that tastes better. And nobody ever goes backwards. So then they want something better. And so if you think of a WBC where there's 50 to maybe 55 competitors who have all been through their country's competition. And in Australia, you've got 4 states. You've got how many people in each state competing. So how many people of those competitors? How many people? How much competition have they got around the shop where they're competing? So the whole level of coffee in the specialty coffee industry started to rise and rose through competition. And roasters started to roast different coffees for different people because their coffee is now being showcased differently, and there's people appreciating different coffees. So it was a very, very valuable way to help the industry, but also for me to see the world. I was fortunate enough then, while I was managing it with Asia, I found out that it's much easier to manage Asia in Asia and Australia remotely than manage Australia here and Asia remotely, because what happens is you go over and you tell everybody what you want to do and you work with people and you jump on your plane and come home and everybody goes, oh, he's gone now, and they go back to doing what they're doing. Whereas we're a little bit more compliant here, so if you have a direction, people will tend to follow it and do it. So I picked up my family once again and we moved to Malaysia and spent 5 years living in Malaysia, operating Asia Pacific out of there. And once again, a great experience is in the coffee cycle, working with the guy. When I got to Malaysia, there was 1 or 2 places you can go out and get a decent coffee. There's now a myriad of places you can go out and get a decent coffee in and around KL. Jason Lou, where Jason does some great coffees. You've got the Red Bean Bag. You've got all these different little cafes who are generally people that went to university in Australia to be engineers, loved what they did because they worked as baristas in Australia, have gone back and said, let's open up a cafe. So the Australian influence, I suppose, is gone back through that area. Once again, as all good things, I've done 10 years then in a corporate world with Harry. They were asking if I wanted to sign for another 3 or 4 year contract, and I thought, no, it's time for me to come back to Australia, and came back in and have been working at a couple of different places, but everything is coffee related. It's still in the coffee industry with working with the passionate people that I like working with and being associated with people and the brands that you grow to know. I suppose that's what do I get out of it? Well, you don't have to be a barista to make your way in coffee. You don't have to work behind the counter to make your way in coffee. There's many, many other aspects you can do, many other areas. Look at the business as cafe, not coffee. That's how I do it, because coffee is one part of it. Cafe is the total concept. It's where your plant milks are. It's where you sit on, or your chocolates or these other things where people want to go to a cafe, but they've already had enough coffee for the day. They're always going to have their coffee. What else can they have? Rather than having a carbonated soft drink, why not something that's handcrafted that adds value to a cafe? And instead of giving them 50 cents from the profit out of a can, gives them $4.50 profit from a crafted drink, makes them more profitable and therefore more valuable. So there's more than one way, I suppose, you can pay back to the industry, and you can assist people in there. So 45 years later, I'm still working, still doing what I love, and I hope to for at least a couple more years anyway, leading on. And that's my journey.
No problem, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Our last speaker today, again, has been in the industry for many years. Started off as a barista, had training roles with Grinders, Gloria Jeans, Honor Coffee, Canberra, brand ambassador for 7 Miles Coffee, and now with Josie Coffee in Newcastle. Paul Asquith. Thank you, Paul.
All right, I've been here before. It's almost, well, it's past here actually. So everybody get up. Shake your right leg. Shake your left. Arms up. And jump around. All right, now I know you're going to do exactly what I tell you to. Sit down and let's talk. It's absolutely a privilege to be here and talk about who I am, what I've done in coffee. I realise now I've reached that point where I'm old enough to be respected and be considered a veteran in the industry of 20 years and follow some amazing people. I only hope that my hair looks as good as Duddo's does when I'm as young as he is. I'm gonna follow some notes, otherwise I'll get way off track. And I'm also aware that I think the talks have actually become a little bit longer in the afternoon, so I want to make sure I get everything out in a short time. So let me think about when I started. And when I started in coffee, coffee wasn't really a thing, but there were things that I wanted to know as a barista, as a young barista. There were questions I had, like, what is coffee? How do I make a good coffee? How do I make sure that this is a sustainable career, and can I make it a career? And will chai lattes really be around in 20 years' time? So I guess, I had some deep questions, really. So I'm going to talk about some of the, 8 main lessons that I've learned in coffee, and a little bit of a chronological journey of what I've done. So to do that, my first coffee memory probably goes back to when I made coffee for my parents. I was probably 10 years old, and you'd boil a kettle and you'd get the Nescafe out, and back then there was powdered milk as well. And you'd make a hot cup of coffee with powdered milk and Nescafe. Not as probably good as Phil's memories of a cafetiera. I think I only remember that at some of my uncle's places that were of different cultures to me. Mine was more of a conversation of, do you put the powdered milk in first or the coffee in first? And do you use boiling hot water or not? So that's my main first memory. But I guess further on, as I grew up, it was certainly of that culture when cafes started to become a thing, and we started to, like as young people, not just go to pubs. We went to cafes at night time, and we'd sit and we'd talk and we'd drink and we'd enjoy coffee. And it started to become a thing I was really interested in. But at the time, I wanted to be a RAF pilot. So I was like, yeah, cool, I'll do all the things that I need to do to become a RAF pilot. And then I was diagnosed, well, not diagnosed, but prescribed glasses. And back then, that meant you couldn't fly a jet. So I gave up on the RAF dream. So I decided to be a graphic designer. And I pursued all of those things. Actually, at the age of 16, I became a junior artist for an advertising firm in Newcastle. Pretended to be an adult. 10 months later, I failed. So I then went back to study. Thought, no, I'll stick to this sort of thing. And I studied web design because that was up and coming at that time. Studied web design and web design management, and started to sort of do a little bit of freelance work in web. Now, back then, there wasn't a lot of work around, so naturally I needed to subsidise the income, and coffee was what came out of that. So I thought, I'll start working in a cafe. So I started in this little cafe in a really well-known strip in Newcastle called the Anna Capri. I was behind an old San Marco machine using Lavazza, and that was shit hot back then. Lavazza was the thing, people wanted Lavazza, and it was like the best coffee because it was imported from Italy and all that sort of stuff. And so I jumped on the machine. I knew nothing. No one showed me anything. I had to figure it out myself. I really did. I'd jump on the machine and just see what worked, and knew nothing about adjusting grinders, nothing about timing shots. Didn't really know anything about steaming milk either, but I figured it out a little bit. And I guess, in that time, I learned one of my main lessons, and that is, I'm just trying to find it, what I wrote exactly. What the customer thinks of you is not necessarily true. The customer thought I was the best barista. When I look back at it, I wasn't the best barista. Enter Glory Jeans. It was about that time that Glory Jeans started a really big explosion in the country. I think there were about 80 stores, and they were opening up a few in Newcastle. And so I decided to apply. Now a lot of you probably look at brands like Glory Jeans now and kind of edge away from it like it's that weird uncle that you don't want to know. The gateway to coffee for many, many people in the industry. I heard mention of Jack Hanna before. Guess where he started? Glory Jeans. Look at him now. There are people that have been in this industry for a long time that came from places like that. So for me, Glory Jeans was a really good starting ground. This is where I actually learned the variables of coffee. I got the chance to adjust grinders, understand shots, understand coffee, understand origins, understand doing milk. And Glory Jeans was one of the first brands to actually get away from doing Everest style foam on top. It was from day one, it was pour straight to the top with a really nice crispy milk texture and none of that stupid airy dry cappuccino business. So for me, that was a place that I really started to learn really good things in coffee. And that's where I sort of started to cling on to a couple of mentors. It's interesting, Sam brought up Corinne. Corinne was one of my first mentors as well, because she was at Glory Jeans at the time, and she sort of did a lot to change the way that they made coffee. And she also introduced Barista Championships. So in 2005, I competed in my first championship. It wasn't a Asker one, it was the Glory Jeans coffee. Sean was a judge. Shows you how long ago, I don't even remember that, I'm sorry. No, before that, it was 05. It was up in, anyway. So I competed. I was lucky enough to make it all the way through to the finals and come fourth that year. But one of the things it did do was sort of put me on the, put me on the landscape for people amongst the Glory Jeans head office. So then, fast track 6 months later, I had the chance to apply for the group trainer barista trainer role. And so I applied for it. And obviously because I, was someone well known within the company, I was actually really successful and got the job. And so I moved to Sydney and took on that role. So lesson number 2 is put yourselves out there. This is going to teach you things beyond what you know right now. And this was really the first step in my professional career. I got to work with some absolute legends. Some of them are still in coffee, some of them are not. But they taught me a lot of things about coffee back then. Being a trainer at Glory Jeans taught me a lot about systems and processes and the importance of knowing your product really well. And I guess it gave me a chance to learn a lot more, again, about origins of coffee, learn a lot more about coffee flavour and how we got that end of the coffee to interact with this end of the coffee, and then become succinct as a coffee professional, because then I needed to speak to hundreds of people every year to train that. I counted one year, and one of my last years I trained 934 people in 1 year. And that was a combo of baristas and franchise partners and multi franchise partners, and also international franchise partners. So I got to train quite a big array of people, and training something in English to some people is fine, but training in English to other people that are from another country is a lot harder. And so becoming comfortable with how I was as a trainer was really important. Becoming succinct and understanding what it was and what was important, and how to break that down into individual easy steps was really important. So I really started to, craft my own style. Whilst at Glory Jeans, I had another go at Barista Championships, and this was in '08. It was my first chance at the Australian Specialty Coffee Association. Back then it was Australasian Specialty Coffee Association Barista Championships in '08. So I went along and I competed at the state level. I did okay. Someone said, "Oh, you really should try the Opens event down at Nationals," which was your kind of last chance to get into the finals. And so I went down to Melbourne and competed in the Opens, and I was the first competitor. Back then I didn't have a grinder or anything. I didn't have my own grinder, so I used the competition grinder. The grinder had just gotten off the back of the truck, and I had a lot of trouble adjusting it in prep, and I was still frazzled come comp time and did a pretty shit job, to be perfectly honest. I was pretty unprepared. And, I spent the rest of the day watching all of the amazing barista competitors and stuff. And then at the end of the day, I was sitting in front of the judges, and one of the feedback from one of the judges really stuck with me, and that judge was like, just need to be more prepared. I could have got it in two moves. Thanks, Phil DeBella. So lesson number 3, you have a choice on how you respond to criticism. So for a little while I was pretty cranky with Phil, I'm not going to lie. But it lit a fire in me. I was like, you know what? I'm going to show him. I'm going to do something. And whether or not he's watched my career from there or my anything from there, it doesn't matter to me. But what I do know is he lit a spark in me that said, no, I can be better and I can do this better. So that gave me a chance to really look back at what I was as a barista competitor and a barista and find things that drove me to be better. So I spent another couple of years as the trainer at Glory Jeans, crafting my style even more. But at this point, because I was traveling a lot, I started to gain quite a really good network around the country, and I got to learn from a lot of people. I traveled to Adelaide and I'd spend time with people in Adelaide. I'd travel to Perth and I'd spend time with people in Perth, and just learn things along the way and get the chance where, you walk into someone's cafe and they're like, oh, just come back and use the coffee machine, have a go at pulling a shot on that. And, this is the first time I got to stand behind a slayer and pull a shot with pressure profiling, stuff like that. I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not started to expand my network and I guess become friends with all of these people. So that for me is kind of an important thing, is, expand that network, be in people's pockets and just talk. In '09, another Oscar comp, and this time I actually came third in New South Wales, so I did reasonably okay. In 2010, I then competed in another GJ's championship, and this was the first chance I really got to spend some time with a mentor around Barista Championship, and that was Dave Macon at the time. We brought him in to train me. I spent a lot of time with him, and he really whipped me into shape. If anyone's ever met Dave Macon, you'll know that he is detailed to the point, arrogant about it when he wants to be, but excellent, absolutely amazing barista competitor, and that's why he did so well at what he did. As prepared as I was, I didn't win that championship, unfortunately, but I still come out of it with a lot of learning. And I guess at this point, what I'm going to say is one of the best things about barista competition, whether you're involved on one side or the other, is one of the greatest places that you can learn about yourself as a barista. You can look deep into your knowledge and your understanding and objectively tear it apart. And being a barista competitor has done that, being a barista judge has done that. I guess from that point, I actually stepped into kind of a transitional period and decided that it was Glory Jeans had enough of my time. It was time to move on to something else. It was time to move out of franchise. So I moved into Grinders Coffee as their national training manager. And this was quite a big step in a role for me. I've gone from just being, I guess, a group barista trainer now to a manager, now managing a team of people. And that was an interesting role. I'd never really managed people above cafe level. So now I was managing professionally 5 barista trainers around the country, whilst also running a training program in the Sydney office. And I stepped into that role with a little bit of self-worth, I guess, understanding that I knew a fair bit about coffee and had been brought in as a person to kind of shape their training program a little bit. but I was up against some pretty old heads. This is a very old roasting company. At the time, it was 40-something years old. They were roasting 54 tonne of coffee a year. And naturally, the trainers, particularly in Melbourne, were pretty stubborn. So I guess developing a relationship with that was always a challenge. Changing things in that business was always a massive challenge. I guess in my time, I would have liked to really evolve the training program there and really come up with something that was better and would push them in the right direction. But unfortunately, my relationship with the people there were pushed me to a point where I couldn't do that. And I had almost this point where my team kind of lost all respect and be the person that I was meant to be there. So lesson number 4, and I had a really good chance to kind of reflect on that in my time there. Now, in my time there, I'd also sort of stepped away from being a barista competitor, stepped into actually being a barista judge, and I had a chance to judge some of the New South Wales and ACT competitions, and also national competitions, and got a really good chance to see that side of the desk instead of the other side of the desk. And so I guess it probably taught me more about being a barista competitor than I had learned previously. So doing both has really kind of awarded me the experience to be able to be more knowledgeable in that position, in training and in coaching baristas, and I guess being a better barista competitor as well. Backtrack a little bit, because of barista competition in 2008, I actually met a really famous barista. He owns a company you might have heard of called Honor Coffee. So in 2012, I was having a coffee with him, and he said, we were having a good chat about things. He's like, I'm thinking about taking Honor Coffee up to Sydney, and I think you're a really big part of that. I was like, hang on a second, what did you say? He's like, yeah, I think you're a really big part of that. And he kind of just left it at that, and we just kept talking. And it's like, hang on a second, he's put this little earworm in and said, you are going to work for Honor Coffee. And it hadn't offered me a role or anything like that. And I sort of went home, and 2 weeks later I rang him and I was like, what the hell did you say to me back then? He's like, I want you to work for me. I was like, cool, all right, well, I'm going away for a month soon, so how about we look at me resigning and going away for a month, and then I'll come back and I'll start with you. So that's exactly what I did. And in that time, I actually got the chance to go on the first coffee farm under my own steam. I went to New York. I spent some time in New York, and then I went to Central America and traveled around. I went into some coffee farms in Nicaragua and El Salvador and Costa Rica. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest things that really ignited a passion for me in coffee. Now I was actually at the origin. Now I was getting a chance to see what was going on Coffee Farm and meeting the people that did what they did and seeing the hard work behind all of that. And that was like, wow, now I've got this sense of self-importance of what I do, and I need to respect what I've just seen and what I've just met, and I need to I guess do something about that. So from that point onwards, I was always really interested in origin and the agronomy and how things happen at farm and the conditions and all of those sort of things. So fortunately, I was stepping into a place that was going to foster that. Honor Coffee was a place that was really going to foster that interest in that. So lesson number 5, get out of your world of coffee as you know it. If you can, under your own steam, even if you're not sponsored to do so, try to get out and see the other aspects of the industry that you love so much. So on to Honor and on to really big learnings. There were some really passionate people there. Obviously, a lot of people that like to compete in barista championships and spend a lot of time being better. And I was employed to be one of those people as well, to be better and to learn more and to bring my knowledge into that that kind of group. So, this is when I first brought the idea of TDS and looking at extraction yields to Honor, and we all geeked out over that. And we spent times breaking down every individual part of making coffee that we could, right down to just tasting individual acidities to work out flavour of coffee, right down to putting up a whole bank of grinders and tasting the same coffee on all of those grinders and deciding which grinder we really liked the most. Interestingly, the whole Anthem thing at Honor was sparked by the fact that I used one of those grinders, and they were all really getting fed up as to why I always had the best tasting espresso. So that's why we put all of the grinders up on the table and tasted the coffee in all of them and decided, well, that's actually where it tastes the best. So we're going to use that grinder from now on in barista competition. So it was one of those sort of things. At Honor, I was a jack of all trades though, because I looked after the Sydney and I was disconnected from the Canberra connection. I had to look after my customers in all facets. I had to train, I had to be their business development manager, I had to be their technician, I had to be everything. So I got a really good chance to, I guess, pick up more and more and more skills. Putting yourself in that point of an uncomfortable area of things that you don't know will give you a chance to go out and discover more. So, you know, whilst I was probably underskilled for the role at the time, I gave that chance, the opportunity to be better and to learn more and to go out and access more skills in that time. In 2012, I placed second in the ASCA Barista Championship in New South Wales. And I also then won the Australasian Grand Barista Championship. This actually awarded me trips to China and to Hong Kong, which was really interesting. I got the chance to, I guess, immerse myself in competitions in those areas and learn a little bit more about how coffee was perceived in other parts of the world, and learn more about how, I guess, Australian coffee was perceived by other parts of the world as well. But it was around about 2013 that I started to step into other forms of judging as well, and that's when I did my first Golden Bean. And around about that time, I also did the first Australian International Coffee Awards, and got the chance to sit amongst absolute legends in the industry and taste coffee and objectively understand coffee a little bit more, and get into, you know, that back end of judging and see what it was to, I guess, judge a coffee from that level. So I got a really good insight into many different roasters around the country and how to judge their coffee. And if I would say to anyone, if you get that opportunity, take that opportunity as much as you can. If you can go to one of those competitions, you will learn a lot about coffee. So often we can be so insular and my coffee is the best coffee and everyone else has got shit coffee, and you know, you're in your little bubble and you understand that, and you might go to the odd cafe here and there and like their coffee or hate their coffee or whatever, but when you sit in a room and you taste 50 coffees in a day or something like that, then you start to understand how much good coffee and bad coffee, but good coffee is out there. So you get a chance to really, I guess, extend your knowledge. As I said, with Honor, I got to work with a lot of legends, but there did come a point in time, I guess, in 2015, that I had to make a really tough decision, and that was to leave Honor Coffee. And it was part of one of those things, like we were talking about, like Phil was talking about before. You know, you get to a point where you know your value and you know your point in time, and you got to make those decisions. And I decided I had to leave, and ironically, it was 2 weeks after Sasha brought a big trophy home saying he was the world barista champion. So anyway, I decided to take a bit of a step back, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to hang in a cafe for a little while, and I'm going to put everything I've learned up to this point into practice. So I worked in a busy little cafe in Sydney, where they guested a whole bunch of coffees, and this gave me a good chance to dial in coffees, to understand individual coffees a lot more, to serve a lot of coffee in a day. We were sort of serving around 1,200 cups a day, so it was a really busy little cafe, but it was a really good chance to put everything that I taught to baristas and everything that I preached and everything I taught about coffee and adjusting and to practice. It was one of those moments like Sam was talking about earlier. It's like, you know, we spend so long talking about how we're going to do these things, and we can do it and you can do it in your cafe, and it's all well and good to say all of those things, but until you can actually demonstrate that and step back and put it into practice, you do sometimes sound like you're just preaching from a hill and saying that you can do this and not necessarily understanding that you can. So at a certain point in time, you really need to, I guess, put your knowledge to the test and make sure that you can make that stuff happen as well. So lesson number 7, no, have I skipped 6? I don't know. know when things need to change. Now, it didn't last long, and it was only 3 months before I was picked up by the company. At that time, it was Bellaroma, a very old company again, going back to a big company. So going from big franchise to massive coffee company to small company back to a big company. And this was my chance to, I guess, put a lot of my experience up until this point now into practice. I'd had experience in a big roasting company, in a franchise. All of these things taught me a lot of systems and processes. I'd had experience in a small specialty company that taught me a lot about origin and coffee flavour and stuff like that. So now I was being, I guess, employed as an expert in all things. So when I was employed at Bellaroma, my role initially was roaster, QA, trainer, and something else. Can't even remember. It was everything, basically. It wasn't a head of coffee, although I would have loved to have that role. Head of coffee, it never was. And I think had I had that head of coffee role, it might have been a little bit of an easier path into that company. I did, again, come up against some pretty old heads there, but I was a little bit more street smart this time. I'd learnt my lessons from the days of grinders. I wasn't managing people, but this was a chance for me to just come in and say, look, you've got your beliefs in coffee, I've got my beliefs in coffee. Let's share those and let's see where we can come to. Let's come to an equal ground somewhere, and let's move some things in the right direction. It was right about that point in time when Bellaroma was taking the shift to 7 miles, and there were a lot of things changing. There were a lot of people uncomfortable in that time. We were changing the name of the company. Bellaroma was becoming not the name of the company, it was just becoming a brand. 7 miles was becoming this flagship. No one understood what it was. Could I go out and sell 7 miles? No, you can't. Are we going to have a 7 miles bag of coffee? No, you're not. What are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? It was a good opportunity, again, to go to Origin and spend some time with coffee farmers and try to, I guess, lead a change there. And a traditional company that had been buying coffee, fairly traditionally up until that point, to find a company that maybe started to buy traceable coffee and stuff like that. So, there were things changing, and there were a lot of people that didn't like it, and there were a lot of people that did like it. I got the opportunity then to build a new training facility for 7 miles. The downstairs area was a cafe. We closed it, much to the disgust of a lot of locals. They're like, where am I going to get my burgers from now? And they were like, can we sign a petition to stop you from closing it? No, you can't. It's not your decision. It's ours. But we closed it, and we decided to turn it into a training area. And my vision for that was to turn it into a training area that was a little bit like this, not on such a bloody awesome scale that the coffee commune is, smaller scale, but turn it into an area that was a collaborative space that people could come in and use, and to train a lot and to offer a lot of free training. So my time at 7 miles, I had this part of the job, but I also had this awesome part of the job where I started to do masterclasses, and I started to invite a lot of people into that area for free, and just pick a subject and tear it apart, and have, people from that area often talk about one core value or thing in coffee. Following how to taste acidity, how to do a V60. There were things that we just wanted to tear apart, and it gave me a really good chance, I guess, to start to spread that knowledge. And at that point, I think gave me a really good chance, I guess, to start to spread that knowledge. And at that point, I think I came to this realization that I'm actually a trainer. Even though I've got this desire to do all of these things, like roasting, like QA, and all of that sort of stuff, I am actually a trainer. And at heart, my whole career has been sharing that knowledge and mentoring people. I think from a very early point in time, I enjoyed training in the Glory Jeans Cafe, and then at Glory Jeans, and there were parts where I was trainer all the way through, whether I was doing other jobs. But at the core, I realised that being a trainer was one of the things that really drove me to understand all of the other things in coffee, to share that knowledge. So if it's something that you, I guess, consider from your role right now, even though you may just be a barista in a cafe, start to share that knowledge, start to train, start to develop who you are as a person. time at 7 Miles, I had more years judging. I was one of the panel chairs at Australian International Coffee Awards. I was category head judge at Golden Bean. Fortunately, I'm starting to get to this position now that I get some of these more, you progress and you become respected and you get all of these opportunities, and it's really good. In 2017, I had my most successful ASCA go, and I got into the semi-finals. I think for now, I've retired as a barista competitor, I think. I'm not sure. I may go back. Interestingly, the last time I walked in, Dave Macon saw me and was like, "Is there a Masters competition?" No. I'm not that old, Dave. Come on. So I had a good role at that, had some fun. I then decided to, start my own business, and this is, probably an interesting thing to do. I'd spent a lot of time working for a lot of people, and I thought, no, I need to pick something that I'm really passionate about, and I'm going to do something about it. And one of the things was, walking into a service station, not being able to get a good coffee. Now, not much for the automatic coffee, cheap end, but I'm thinking, go to a fridge and get a really good coffee. And so often you would walk into somewhere, it's all the different brands, all the different evils of milk and sugar brew company. I had a friend, he was willing to go into business with me, and we developed this business called Slow Brew. And look, we had a really good product with me behind the crafting of the flavour and the coffee and all of that, and him behind the marketing. We had a really good thing going on. Unfortunately, it didn't end up the way it needed to end up, and it is a failed business. It was pushed in directions beyond what I wanted it to be pushed into. It was pushed a little bit faster than I wanted to push it, and I spent a lot of time probably trying to chase my tail while my business partner was like out there going, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this, we'll get this contract, we'll get this investor, we'll get this, and all of a sudden all my money's gone, and I found out that we haven't been paying our rent on the business. Pick your partner wisely, and be careful if they are friends, because we are no longer friends. So I had that, and I was still at 7 Miles at a certain point in time when all of that was happening, but COVID hit, and then my job was all of a sudden on tenterhooks. Training wasn't a thing. I couldn't train people from 1.5 meters away, and I was stood down. So I had a chance to slow down. And at this point, I was living in Newcastle, working in Sydney, travelling back and forth all the time. So I was like, great, I'm going to take a bit of a holiday. I'm going to become a painter. I went and worked for my best mate, who's a painter. I painted houses for a little while. It wasn't long before I ended up back in coffee, though. I went to Josie Coffee, and Josie was like, Chris at Josie was like, hey, you want to join as a barista? Just do a couple of cab shifts while you took the role as a relationship manager, and I've been there for a year ever since. My role really awards me a lot of opportunity to spend some time with some really amazing coffees. We've got an amazing roaster, like a lot of places, but I get a really good chance to be part of everything that happens there, because it's a small team. There's only 3 of us that are in the full-time team, and we get to decide on everything that happens there, and that's really fun. Fortunately, my time in the industry has brought me a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge, and I can put that knowledge into places, even in a young company like Josie, who's only 4 almost 5 years down the track. I can put a lot of my knowledge and a lot of my experience in the big companies, the small companies, and all of the things that I've done along the way, so I can put that into that role. And so I'm really enjoying that time that I've got. I've stuck around this long, I guess, because I've got this passion for coffee. But the passion doesn't just come from coffee. Like everyone, they've chosen a passion in the industry. And for me, the passion is the perception of coffee. And what I mean by that is, when I started in coffee, we were charging $3 for a small coffee. Now we're charging maybe $4, $4.50 If you're lucky, $5 for a small coffee. It hasn't really moved that much. And I am continually, I guess, perplexed by the fact that we can have this handcrafted product that has so many hands touching it along the way and still charge such a small amount for it, whereas that person's probably will happily on a Friday night go and spend $100 to $200 in a cocktail bar or a specialty beer bar, craft beer bar, and use all of that money and place a perceived value on those things, but not so much a perceived value on their everyday coffee. So for me, one of the things that's really important, and one of the things I'm passionate about, I'm talking to the customer as I can about coffee and about where it comes from, and those that are willing to listen. I've become, I guess, really valuable in the way that I approach everything that I do in coffee, and that value comes from the fact that I need to make sure that people respect this product. It's not fuel. If you want fuel, go get Red Bull. If you want that thing in a day that's just going to supercharge you, go do something like that. But if you want this really awesome product that's handcrafted by a trained person and that's something really special, here's a really good coffee. So find your value. Find your value. Teach. Use your knowledge to teach more people. The more you teach, the more you learn. The more you put yourself out there in competition, in judging, the more you learn. The more you talk to people, experience things that aren't just in your circle, the more you learn. That's how you will be a better person and a better barista. And that is how you will craft a career in this industry that is long living and sustainable and fulfilling. Be authentically you. Don't try to be Sasha Sestic. Be you. Don't follow those people blindly. Craft your own ideas. Be authentically you. Your opinions are important. Form your opinions, but listen to others. Be prepared to be wrong. Be prepared to be broken down. Be prepared to be told by a judge that he could have got that grinder in 2 moves. Have those things become fuel to start your fire and to be better. Remember, the customer isn't right, but they're paying your bills. The customer can be a real pain in the ass, but at the end of the day, they're the ones buying coffee. They're the ones keeping this industry alive. So they're important. Treat them like gods, but treat them like gods that need knowledge. So take the customers that want to learn on a journey. Not every customer is going to listen to you. There's going to be customers that are going to walk in and they'll disrespect everything you do in that cup, and that is okay because they just put another $9 for your coffee in the till. Let's hope. But they put more money in the till and they're keeping you alive. Don't be arrogant. Don't ever be arrogant. It's so easy to get caught up in being awesome as a barista or as a roaster or as a trainer or whatever and being like, oh, my coffee is amazing and that coffee around the corner is pretty shit and, whatever. Everyone in this industry is trying to do a good job. No one is out there trying to do a bad job. Like it, but they do, and someone else does. A lot of other people do. And that's one of the things I've learned through judging roasting competitions. There are coffees there that I've been like, oh, holy hell, how do people drink this? But there are people drinking that coffee. So remember that. Don't be arrogant. Don't be afraid to ask questions of the people around. Don't be afraid to reach out to old people like me, because we're here to teach and to learn and to share our experience. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Nice one.
Cheers.
Thanks, Paul. I'm really aware of the time because we're kind of running a bit fine now, so I think we'll just do a really quick Q&A.
Yeah, we might just draw the something device.
Yep.
You can will just maybe. Not just going to be a simple thing for Will to do this. It's going to be Will's one of Will's business development managers for New York, who owns Sunbeam, approached me in New York about 3 years ago about the the vision of where Sunbeam's going as a company, and I sort of reminded him that I was involved in the, Sunbeam, 20 years ago when they first, launched Cafe Series, and how the alignment with the coffee industry was very important at the time. Basically, how being involved, even though they're a domestic machine company, how they've actually created a lot of commercial business opportunities out of that domestic role, and basically people who had a home machine and all of a sudden, I love coffee that much, I'm going to go become a barista, or going to start my own coffee business. So they're really a big starting block. So we've gone on a little journey over the last 2 years, and COVID's held it back a little bit, but we've Cafe Culture sort of jumped in with somebody to re-engage again with an engagement program where we want roasters to be able to sell some equipment to sell coffee. We're in the coffee business as roasters. We want to be able to sell coffee first, but we're the ones that get the questions asked. And we're the ones that, people walk into a roastery that bought a machine around at Harvey Norman, and they're going, bang, I want to learn how to use this. So they didn't teach me at Harvard because they're not coffee people. So we get that role. So we've unofficially become the trainers for a lot of these domestic machine companies. So they've recognised that, and we've sort of going to do a roaster program now. So we're sort of looking at the next 12 months, we've got it all together, getting roasters around the country to showcase domestic equipment. It's going to be great for us because we can sell more coffee. It's going to be good for Sunbeam because they're going to get people more knowledgeable on the machines. They're probably not going to get machines returned as often as that for an operator area versus real breakdowns. So that's where sort of we got a relationship going. So want to say anything more about that, Will, or you're pretty happy?
I think you've captured it all.
What we're going to do today, we've got a beautiful little Barista Max. I love this little machine. It's got the grinder built into it. It's bang for buck. It's very affordable. I've got a couple of Airbnbs and we've thrown in there that have been amazing, and sort of I don't get in trouble to put a $5,000 machine in there, put a ring up saying burn myself with this machine. So we're going to give one of them away today. Thanks to Sunbeam offering to do that for us, and a bit more value on the stay. So we'll use that's only the baristas that are here today to go in.
Brendan Kesby.
Want to get a picture with you and mine? So there you go. Hold on. You got it.
Thanks, guys.
Congratulations.
You're on your push. We got some time constraints we've gone over, so we might sort of skip the Q&A today. Is that all right?
So, my question about the national register?
Yes, we're going to vote for you on the committee. ADC have been amazing in this program, supporting it. I had to do a fair bit of convincing to make this happen. But has everyone enjoyed it today?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got some good value out of it. What I've seen, I've just enjoyed every speaker today, and just hearing these people with all this knowledge come out of the woodwork and basically give their time to us today to do it for you guys. I'm a little bit disappointed that half a dozen people didn't turn up, but we've gone live stream, so lots of people are watching this. So those people didn't turn up. Lucky missed out on a good day. So thanks, Coffee Commune, for the thing. But what I'd like to do now is hand over to Rachel. Rachel will explain a little bit about how the mentor program works. We're going to email out to the 6 winners that we picked today, out of the groups that are here and that put in for it, and the ones that actually applied online. We're going to email them out a list of mentors, and they get, over the next 6 months, they can pick what mentors they want to talk to drive their career. And Rachel just explain a little bit more about the ADC, why you got behind it.
Yeah, well, ADC wanted to be part of, and as Craig said before, about thought leaderships in this journey, and to really get everyone together, and just like the commune here, to just inspire each other. But yeah, I've got the 6 winners here, and we're going to have more information come to them on who their mentors are in the future. So we have Amos. Woo! Awesome. We have Brendan. We have Fran. Yeah. We have Prue. And we have Anastasia.
And I would pick today on the submissions. Still the questions in, and other people did some actually good submissions, but it's going to roll each year. So and don't feel like you missed out today. But obviously, everyone gets a book to Dennis, so bring it through. Phil's written a book, so
I didn't write it, I can't write.
Congratulations. Oh, am I short? No,
No, no.
No, we'll just hang us on.
So the program will start. We're going to use this guinea pigs. Cafe Culture is going to log it pretty well, so we're going to use it as a bit of content and still get feedback. And like I said, at the end of the program, we'll get everyone together and we'll see what those outcomes were and see where you've gone in your career. Thank you very much. Any more from them?
What's that?
Anything?
No, just thank you all for coming. Hope you had a great day. We love being here and sponsoring this. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.
And we've got goodie bags, guys.
Oh, goodie bags. Yeah.
So everyone goes away with it. Just for something we forgot, just the speakers, guy. Thank you very much for your time today. Amazing sort of chats, and I've got to know you a bit better. A lot of these people I've known for a long time, but never had the full story. So just good to hear those stories, and I've heard some new stuff that I didn't know about, which sort of makes you think of those people a little bit different. They're all hard-working people. They're all got passion. You've seen that. So, probably the biggest thing out of the day was, how do you drive that passion? Hopefully Phil's book will help you drive a bit of passion. And again, thanks Coffee Commune for letting us use your space today. Thanks, guys. We've got some pretty cool stuff here. It's cool. Thank you.